Can they wait any longer for us to just dare to do it and dream, to step into those places, those nooks and crannies of our life that are calling and beckoning us to something more?
Welcome to Permission Slips, a place to practice paying compassionate attention to your life so you can experience the wholeness, purpose, and joy you were made for. I'm Jenni LaBrie, a life and leadership coach and a recovering perfectionist, learning alongside you how to give myself permission to be human. I'm so glad you're here with me for this conversation with my friend, Jenni LaBrie. Jenni, welcome. Jenni is a speaker, coach, podcaster, and writer whose mission is to awaken others' belief in their own potential. She helps women trade burnout for hope so they can learn to dream again. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I can't wait. Jenni, will you tell us about who you are, what you do during the day, and maybe a little bit about how we connected?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I first have to say, Jillian, especially I loved your intro when you're talking about where you used to be a perfectionist, right? And I've always used or something similar where I say that I'm a recovering type A.
Yeah.
Right. It really takes practice, especially for us that are recovering from that perfectionist lifestyle. I am definitely one of those. So I just wanted to call that out, especially because I can totally relate there. Thank you so much for the beautiful intro on all of those things, writer, speaker, coach, podcaster, all of that. Yeah, that, those, you start to stack those things up. Really what all of that means succinctly, especially as I grow into who I hope to be, who I'm growing into, is a word wielder and a dream defender, right? All of those things is to wield the word and to defend dreams, right? And so that's really what I'm trying to live up to. I may not be there yet, but I hope to be. And then in terms of just my background is I have almost 2 decades in education already. So I started out as a high school Spanish teacher. So spent so much time in the classroom with high schoolers and adolescents. But really what I felt my heart leaning towards was really the adult learning angle. And that's where I got into the coaching realm. And so I really transitioned from that role as a classroom teacher and became an instructional technology coach. But with that came all things professional learning, all things adult learning, and just that's really where I felt some kind of shift towards that work. So I've been doing that since 2016. I've been coaching professionals, and I can tell you that educators, and Jillian, you know this, educators are some of the hardest working people that you know, and oftentimes to the point of extreme burnout, right?
You know, my passion for educators and supporting educators who are teetering on the edge of burnout, especially. And that's some of the work that I've done in my own coaching work here in Ellensburg. And one of the things that endears me to you so much is that you have a passion for these hardworking professionals who are just hanging on by a thread. So I can't wait to hear more of your story. And I know you've been there and how you reclaimed your own ability to dream.
We talk a lot about the journey of life, and sometimes we're rushing towards goals and we're rushing towards the end in mind, or what does success look like, or what is that goal? And really, what does it mean to journey well? What does it mean to not rush? What does it mean to become and reinvent yourself and grow? And I think there's more and more nowadays as we just see, especially since the pandemic, how much has shifted in terms of every industry, not just education. And I would say it was around, probably 5 years ago where I started to feel this nudge as I grew closer in my faith and grew closer to God himself and speaking to him and really questioning, existential crisis or not. I don't really know what it might have been as the precursor. Certainly the pandemic was rough on us as educators, but I really felt this nudge to be like, there's something else, Jenni. There's something else you're called to do. And I can't say that I've figured it all out yet, but that has just been the journey into what does that mean to write and speak? And how do I bring my coaching into that practice? And how do I help serve women? And so that's kind of how you and I met, right? So to answer the question, initially, like where we found ourselves is at our writers conference. And so at this writers conference, we're just exploring what does that mean to put your heart out there in words for other people. And oh my God, my favorite part of it was like when our eyes locked across the cafeteria, right? And I was like, I feel like I know you. I'm like, how do I know you? And you're like, you're like, we have never met. And literally we had never met, but I felt like there was something there.
But there was a connection. There was a connection. And it was like our eyes knew that there was another person here with a deep soul that was wrestling with, where am I supposed to go next on this journey? I love that you're talking about this sort of undefined stirring that it's rising more and more to the surface in your life and in mine. I relate to the fact that we don't know where we're going yet. We know a general direction and we're taking the next step one at a time. For me right now, here you are helping me have the courage to experiment with this whole podcast thing, which has been something that started when we met together, what was that, 8 months ago? But it's a journey, and that idea of journeying well, even before we're certain, even before we feel confident or ready, even before the pathway feels completely clear, to be brave enough to take a step forward. There's something really beautiful there. And even as you talk about wanting to be a word wielder and a dream defender, there is power in those words, Jenni. And you were so articulate and beautiful in the way you use words. Well, I've read your writing, and Jenni really does write words that are beautiful and inspiring and powerful. And you work really hard at that craft of writing. And I think about what it takes to wield words. And I'm wondering for you, what has that work of pouring your heart and your soul and your effort into your writing life, what has that done for you?
Man, it has transformed a lot. I think that, if you go back to my first couple of pages of a journal, that was, I really fought the Lord on it. Like, I didn't want to journal. I didn't want to put words to paper. I was really, really, I don't know what I was scared of, but that journaling has been really cathartic, therapeutic. And in order to be able to serve and help others, you really have to work through those pieces yourself first and foremost. And so it was an exercise in really becoming more of an integrated whole of myself. It's a process of sanctification that has taken just a lot of deep thought, but it took me a long time to put those words down. I think I probably spent about 20 to 25 years between where I used to write a whole bunch when I was young, and then I took a break. And I should say, like, academically, I've been writing for a long time. I just have to for my work. But like the craft of writing has always been there. But as far as the elements that I think where it comes to wielding words to serve others, it's taken some courage to get there.
Wow, that's a really beautiful observation, that in order for us to do the thing that's stirring inside of us, no matter how deep down that stirring may be, one, there is courage required because it feels risky and unknown, and there's just so much vulnerability when it comes to tapping into those deeper places within us. And two, there is an element of doing some internal work of our own before we can offer anything to the world around us, which for me, I talk a lot with women and the coaching work that I do about discovering their purpose. And so much of the time I talk with them about how I believe each of us has a unique God-given purpose, a role to fulfill in the world that only we can. And there's something really energizing to me about that. So much of the time it's easy to focus on, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to serve, like, externally in terms of what actions we're taking? And what you're saying really highlights what I also believe is that it's more about our identity, who we are, who we're made to be on the inside, than it is about what we do. And what we do and how we live out our identity, who we are, that shows up in the purpose of whatever the next thing is that is overflowing from within us out to the world around us. But it starts with that internal work of discovering more truly what's inside that God has put inside of us to discover for ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about your own process of getting what was on the inside outside into the pages of a journal, how did that then evolve for you in your writing life? Because I know you've done more than just writing in your journal. How has your writing life evolved since that point?
So it is still a work in progress. What I would say is that journaling led me into what I call the sacred commute. So a part of this that I didn't mention in my backstory, I probably spent upwards of a decade commuting 2 hours a day to get to and from all of the drop-offs for my kids and to work. So just a lot of time spent in the car. And it was like, I just felt like I was living a Jesus adjacent rather than a Jesus immersed lifestyle for a really, really long time.
Before you keep going, because not everyone that's listening necessarily knows what you mean by that or would identify what a benefit of one versus the other might be. Mm-hmm. Can you unpack that a little bit? What does it mean to be Jesus adjacent versus Jesus immersed?
Would say that growing up, I grew up in a Christian household, but it was very liturgical. It was very traditional in the sense of you go through the motions of a Sunday, you know who God is, you know the stories, but do you really live? Does he live with you? Does he reside in you? Is he a part of your day to day, right? Are you immersed in his Holy Spirit? Is that Holy Spirit in you, right? And I believe that spark is there once you've accepted Jesus as your savior, but I do believe that for a long time he was kind of on the outskirts because I had other things to do. And it wasn't because I didn't care or I deep down didn't love him, but I think it was just I wasn't immersing myself in knowing how much I needed him and how much I needed to rely on him. And it comes back to that like existential crisis or where the rubber met the road, and I'm commuting to a job where I'm a frontline worker and I'm grappling with my mortality, really, literally. So that's where on those 2-hour commutes for that time specifically is where that sacred commute was born. And so those elements or those practices of how I could do that and what does that mean? Just immersing myself in becoming more relational with the Lord. And how do I do that when I don't have a lot of margin? And in my bubble season, I call it my bubble wrapped seasons of life where like when I was on maternity leave and I'm home, I'm finding myself more in the Word but like when I was just on the go all the time, it was just really hard. And the Lord showed me how to do it in my car, how to just spend time with him there, right?
So for you, you had this background of faith that was important to you already. And again, people listening are at all different points on their faith journey. And so people may be like, I don't really know what I think about Jesus. And even hearing that word is kind of like, oh, I feel uncomfortable, which is totally okay. And then there are other people who are like, yeah, I like that. I resonate with following him and wanting to read my Bible and these spiritual practices that a lot of people who call themselves Christians just assume that we all do. And that's generally accepted as valuable. But you're saying, yeah, I had faith as part of my background and my story, but I reached this point of desperation during the pandemic where I was wrestling to the point where I needed more of him. And I needed to know that he was with me in the everyday moments, including the 2-hour commute that feels so often wasted, right? And you talk a lot about that. So talk about those spaces where you really sensed God inviting you to encounter him during the commute and beyond.
Yeah, I learned what a liminal space is. So if what is a liminal space? And really it's a space where you have margin or extra time, and the commute is one of those. And oftentimes it's filled with talk radio, or nowadays it's a lot more podcasting, right? Maybe somebody listening right now is on a commute, right? And I hope so. And it's great. And I just started to see how I wanted to optimize that time better, right? I just truly believe that in that time, I felt like it seemed for me at a time when I wasn't in crisis, great, surface level's great. But when you start to get into the nitty gritty of the grind and you're feeling just dejected and tired and you just don't want to do it anymore, and you just realize how desperate you really are and what are you desperate for? And sometimes we turn in that desperation to things that maybe aren't as helpful. And some of that used to be the way I would spend that time. And I just kept hearing that, that still quiet voice, that whisper of like, come meet with me here. I'll show you how. And so the commute in general is like an acronym as well. So yeah, there's the sacred commute, but the commute is an acronym and it comes with different practices that relate to each of those letters. So calm, others, music, media, unity, truth, and echo. And some of those are a little more tangible to understand, and some are a little bit more heady, right? A little more nebulous. But even within those practices are pieces to communing with him on the go. And so it's just for me, transformed my life.
And so again, this is you sharing a tool, an acronym that allows people to access some of the practices that you experienced in that liminal space, that in between home and work, work and home, where you really learned to encounter God. But it came from your own journey, right? Like it came from your own need, your own inner processing, and your own experience of how Jesus really could be real to you, with you in the car in traffic.
Yep. And I just I started just picking up the patterns. I was just noticing what I was starting to do and trying to put handles around it. Like as a teacher, like how do you then share with others? You have to kind of put something around it to make it more accessible.
So talk us through just briefly each of those letters, if you would, so that maybe people are listening in the car, like you said, or have a walk that they want to go on and they want that little bit of time that they have by themselves while they're walking, or that little bit of time folding laundry, or, we could probably list a lot of liminal spaces that we don't always see, as you called it, margin too, moments in our day where we could turn our attention differently, away from the overwhelm, away from whatever is dominating our thoughts. We could turn our attention to the person that's with us. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of give us some practical tools to help encounter Jesus.
Absolutely. So those letters are the like umbrella components, basically, of those patterned practices that I noticed were popping up, and some are a lot more easy to unpack than others. And I think that there's no rhyme or reason to the order, right? Like sometimes it makes sense where I just need to be listening to music, right? M is one of those. It doesn't have to go in order, but music is one. And I would say music is probably the first. And now on this side of things, when you start to really see God at work and you're like, oh, that's what you were doing, God, right? Is that music was probably the gateway for me when I finally flipped the channel from listening to talk radio to listening to Christian worship, right? And really getting to know him through music, right? And that act of worship in that way. So music is one of my favorites. It's the gateway. It's a really accessible one. And there's so much more out there related to music than I ever would have thought before. Like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the liturgical Methodist church. Like it was very hymnal, so I didn't realize what else was out there to be able to connect with him from that. And there's just something that happens in our brains when there's music there. So that's one of them. I mean, even throughout that, there's different tools for like taking in music. And what does it mean to actually worship outwardly with music? And how do you feel music? So there's different practices within music itself. Another one that comes to mind, another one of the M's, so COMMUTE has 2 M's, was media. So again, being that natural educator, in general, I just wanted to learn more and consume more, but I wanted to start consuming. It was almost like he was nudging to be like, Jenni, learn more about me. Learn more about me. So, I mean, I was consuming so much content related to not only podcasts, but listening to the Bible app and having the Bible read to me while I'm on the go versus I don't have time. I don't have an hour in front of the fireplace under a blanket reading my Bible. So how can I actually consume the word on the go? There's just so many great apps out there now as well. So media was another one, right? How do I learn? How do I unlearn? That's a big one that I like to go into depth about too, is how do we unlearn some things? And that's sometimes harder than the learning. And then the relearn. What do I have to relearn? And I think there's something there with the word repent, right? When we think of is the again and the again and the again of what do we need to remind ourselves and turn towards the Lord again. So there's stuff there with media as well in those elements. Yeah, I could go on and on. I don't know how many you want to cover. I mean, I could go through all.
And I'm wondering a couple of things. One, is there a way that people who are listening can get more information about this acronym and how to plug into their sacred commute?
Yeah.
2, do you have a favorite letter to practice? You mentioned music, but
yeah. Oh, that was hard. It's like, which one of your kids is your favorite, Jillian? Yeah. I'll go. So to the first part of it, you can find me at Sacred Commuters on Instagram. And then I also have my website, JenniLaBrie.com. And on there are some freebies that you can find them yourself, specific freebies related to the entire acronym and all of those elements. So you can download that at will if you'd like. And then there's also some that are built out even more in depth with some swipe files, basically is what I call them. Some swipe files to help you.
I can link all that too in the show notes once I figure out technology. So people can
get there. You'll get there.
We're learning as we go.
My favorite one
Yeah.
My favorite one. Do I have to go there? Man, it's hard, but I think probably in this moment, right? Like even with your kids, like, oh, I'm really liking you today. There's certain days where you're like, oh, you're extra lovey today. So I would say that I really love echo because I think it's unexpected. I think it's harder to explain, right? But when you think of the ripple effect that you have, when you take all of this in and that big churchy word of sanctification, and what does that all mean? And why am I even doing any of this, right? What does that mean to echo that into the world? I really love that take on it and thinking about reflecting, processing, and the hardest one is obey, right? And that's all part of echoing. How do you obey? And so that probably in this moment is probably the one I would say is my favorite today.
I love that. And I love that picture of echo as like a ripple. I can see, like a sound wave rippling through the air, and that being a connection to this conversation about dreaming too. And what does it look like for our dreams to not just stay within ourselves, but to echo out into the world around us and change the sound, not only the sound, but the landscape beyond us. And so I'm curious about this aspect of who you are and what you do, where you call yourself a dream defender and the fierce warrior that I picture when I think of someone defending dreams. Talk more about what it means to you to be a dream defender.
I love that connection that you just drew there. I don't know if I've naturally thought of connecting the sacred commute that way, but again, like that just is how God works, is like all of these little fragmented pieces that just start to coalesce around something that's so much bigger than ourselves, right? Yeah, and I feel like being that those, how I mentioned, like I felt those nudges of like, yeah, you've been in the classroom, you've been teaching high schoolers. Yes, you've been in the world of professional learning and helping adults for the last 8 to 9 years, right? But there's more. And I'm still trying to land on what that more is, but the more I talk around it, the more passionate I feel about defending dreams. And in the coaching work, which you know very well, there's this piece about why is it valuable? And I think sometimes we don't always understand the value of a coach in terms of our lives or our lifestyle. We understand it in terms and context of athletics, right? But when it comes to what does that mean? There's just something that is thwarting our dreams, right? Something, whether it's the enemy or whether it's our sinful nature or whatever it might be, that is a part of not allowing us to step into the dreams and the purpose that you're talking about that God has for us, right? The Lord is really has put into each of us this potential that's there. And what is holding it back, right? And I loved that a few moments ago you had mentioned that the goal setting. And you mentioned what is the object of what we're trying to reach towards and get to that final end piece of that goal. And I have worked for so many years now with people writing goals and trying to reach them. And what I found in that is many times you've heard of SMART goals, right? Yeah. Right? The acronym of SMART. And those work, but the magic happens, the power happens with our goals when we start using, I use an acronym. It comes from Jim Knight. It's, again, it may be an educational acronym, but the PEERS check I use, which is an acronym PEERS. And it's similar to SMART, right? There's some of the letters refer to like the reachable and the measurable pieces. But my favorite are the P, powerful, and one of the E's is emotionally compelling. And that is always, always important, yet so easily forgotten. And I think that ties into our dreams. I do, in the hope that we have. And if we don't really tap into that or have someone that helps us through that, it's really easy to get caught up in the minutia of the products we're trying to create and the striving that we're doing, where what is emotionally compelling in this moment that's going to keep me moving forward when the going gets tough, because it's going to get tough.
Right. And I love that you're creating space to even ask that question, because I think so much of the time women, well, I'll speak from personal experience here. It's felt like what I want, what I desire, my longings are irrelevant to the work that needs to get done. As if my emotional experience needs to be contained and restrained and disconnected in order to push through the hard work that I need to do. What in any area of my life, whether that's in work goals, or it could be, physical health goals, or it could be in parenting. Like, life is hard. To be responsible and to be disciplined is the only way to push through and actually reach goals of value. And what you're saying is, no, those things aren't disconnected. In fact, our motivation, we talk about this all the time with clients, is that our emotions are a critical piece of our motivation. If we can't connect our emotions to the why we want to set any goal, we want to work toward a goal, we're going to give it up as soon as it gets hard. Like you just said.
And it always gets hard. Always. I think I have to find it when it doesn't.
Absolutely. And so this idea of tapping into dreams, some people say that our dreams are selfish. Our dreams are irrelevant to our work. But I'm hearing you say that dreams maybe are more important than we give them credit for being. Can you talk a bit about how you see our dreams playing into how God's made us and what He wants us to do or know about the life He's made us for?
I cannot wait to talk about this. I was hoping that we would go here in this conversation, Jillian. I have also grappled with this, especially as I'm workshopping the word wielder and the dream defender concept and thinking about, is the concept of dreaming biblical? Like, is it spiritual? Is it frivolous? Is it fruitless? Like, all of these questions are spinning around in my head. Like, is this something that is, because if it's not, and it's not of the Lord, I don't want it, right? And so I've done and spent a lot of time reflecting and journaling and even in the Word to figure this out, right? And even studying the word dream and how it fits into the biblical context. And I am no expert. I will not claim to be in that regard. I'm not a theological seminarian or anything, but I have spent the time because it's like, why am I feeling so drawn to this, Lord, if this isn't of you? And I need to know if it is. And so in that word study of just the word dream, I'm searching like, what is in the Bible about dreams? And a lot of it's about and around the prophetic, right? Having this dream to say, I'm like, but that's not the essence of what I'm really like feeling, right? Like, yes, that's also important. Maybe that's someone else's purpose and calling and working through that, right? But it's not quite the essence of what I'm feeling when it comes to defending dreams. And it's, you used the word, I don't know if you caught it, but as you did, I was like, yes, was the word longing. The word longing. So again, going through tons of verses with dreams in them and it not fitting. And I finally stumbled across Proverbs 13:12, because this is where I was finally like, it's starting to get to where I'm trying to figure this out, right? And Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And hope is one of those elements that I talk a lot about too, right? So hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. And a dream fulfilled, the word that they use dream in the NLT, or I think it's the NLT, perhaps it's the NIV, I'd have to go back in my notes. But that word dream in other versions doesn't exist. It's actually the word longing or desire.
Wow.
And so I'm like, this is starting to get to the root of it. So then you go into the Blue Letter Bible, and you're like looking up all of the etymology of the words and stuff. And really, what are we dreaming for? What are we longing for? And then it took me then into 1 Corinthians 12:31. And that one, the same word, and it often doesn't come across as the word dream, but it's the same Hebrew word when you get down to the root of it, that longing or desire, right? And 1 Corinthians 12:31 says, but earnestly desire, long for, dream the higher gifts, and still I will show you a more excellent way. And so I truly believe that those are all interconnected in some way. There's something there that the Lord wants us in our dreaming, in our desiring, in our longing. And yes, we need to have it. We need to have the Holy Spirit help discern those dreams, right? Especially if we're looking to walk in step with Him, right? There are other dreams like you mentioned, right? When it comes to parenting, when we goal set for parenting, or the dreams that we have for our careers and the dreams that we have for our relationships and marriages, all of that is connected. But at the end of the day, what are we really longing for? And having that conversation, not only with the Lord and yourself, but also with people that are helping you discern those dreams. Imagine what kind of purpose you can unlock in yourself and in others.
Jenni, I love hearing you talk about this, because even just as you're explaining the word steady that you did, digging into different aspects of dreaming and longing and heart and the desire around that, I can hear the energy in your voice. I can feel through the airwaves here. I can feel the shift in the room. And there is an energy connected to our dreams. There is an energy connected to our desire. And in fact, emotion, if you look at the purpose of emotion in our body, it comes from the word motion, emotion, energy in motion. Yep. It's literally it's the driving force behind all of our behavior, for better or worse. Anything we do is driven by an emotion underneath. And that could be, a positive, helpful emotion, or it could be, well, I would argue that all emotion is helpful if we pay attention to it. But we could be driven by fear. We could be driven by anger, or we could be driven by attention to our longing. And what I'm hearing you say is our longing is worth paying attention to. Yeah. That there is something good and beautiful in that longing that will, if we allow it, will eventually lead us to the higher things, the good things, the beautiful things that God has in store for each one of us, if we're willing to seek Him in it, if we're willing to offer those things to Him in trust and love. And I'm so curious, as you're talking about dreams, something I've encountered in my own life and in friends and the women I work with is it is hard for women to dream. Mm-hmm. It is hard for us to know what we're longing for, let alone to tap into a vision, a dream beyond often surviving the current moment, getting through the day. So I'm wondering, what advice would you give to someone who is wondering, how do I even start to dream again?
The first thing that comes to mind, and I will humble myself before even the advice comes, because I just want to say to that person, I see you. I've been that person. I am that person. And so it is hard to dream. It seems frivolous. And that's, I think, why I was getting at the biblical elements of why I was really searching for that, because it's why am I feeling this way about myself and others to help them do this hard work? Why is it that it's so difficult for us to dream? And I don't have all the answers. I guess my advice would be to don't do it alone. Coaching is a wonderful tool. And if you are privileged enough to be able to have someone in your circle that you're able to have coach you through these, by all means, take them up or seek someone out. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that either. I can even, Jillian, the connecting we do multiple times a week, right? Yeah. It is in direct opposition to that force that's saying, that's frivolous. You don't need to do that. That isn't, put your effort and energy somewhere else. Instead, you need those people, those encouraging voices that are going to say that matters. And it keeps recurring in your psyche. It keeps recurring in your heart. You're feeling something within you that you can't ignore it. And who's going to help you not ignore it? And so who's going to be that for you? Do you have that?
Well, and I hear you saying, I want to do that for the people I work with. I want to do that for the people I coach. I want to do that for the people who I'm writing words for. I want to do that to the audiences I'm speaking to. I want to do that to my friends, which you do. Jenni, you were referencing our Marco Polo conversations with Michelle, the three of us. That's Marco Polo group where we bring our real life stuff, but truly it's a place where we come and we get to share updates on our dreams and the discouragement that comes from trying to access those dreams or work toward those dreams in real life. The questions we have about our dreams and is this okay? And is this me trying to make a name for myself? Is this actually God-given? Is this something that I'm distorting? Am I trying to force something here? Or is this a door that's open for a reason right now for such a time as this? And we do that dreaming together because none of us is meant to dream alone. None of us is meant to walk out our purpose alone. And like you said, when I share a dream and, I'm thinking of just a silly example is this podcast. I qualify it like it's silly. It's not silly. This is a big deal. This is something I've been dreaming about for years. And for me to take this from an inside thing that I was too embarrassed to say out loud to anyone, to then tell you and Michelle at this writing conference, I think I want to start a podcast. And there was a little bit of a cringe,
I remember.
I'm kind of embarrassed. Like, is that okay for me to want this? Okay. Am I a little bit to want this? But I needed you to say back to me, yeah, Jillian, you're allowed to dream. And you did that for me initially, and you've done it over and over and over and over again. You've defended my dream. And I know that this dream is part of a bigger dream in my own writing journey that I can't quite see how it fits yet. But you're defending that dream in my life, advocating for, making space for, saying, Jillian, let's schedule a time to record a conversation for your podcast because I know that you need someone to do it with you. And I said, yes, I do. Thank you.
Yep.
But so you're doing that. You're doing that already in the relationships in front of you. And it makes me think about how we all need dream defenders. Like you said, whether it's a coach or a friend that really sees us and makes space for our dreams. Hopefully both. You know, you and I are both coaches, so we can plug our own work.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, as we get to the end of our time, if you were to give someone permission, what would you want them to know that they're allowed to do?
Dare to dream. It requires boldness. It requires fortitude. It requires a little bit of a rebellious spirit. And it's hard to do it. As you mentioned, there's lots of times where as women, we feel like, I can't right now, but can we afford not to? Can the world afford not to? Are the people we're meant to serve, can they wait any longer for us to just dare to do it and dream, to step into those places, those nooks and crannies of our life that are calling and beckoning us to something more?
I love that. And I love what that stirs up in me, even as I hear you say, dare to dream. Like it's almost invoking some courage and recognizing that it actually does feel risky and vulnerable to access parts of myself that have been dormant. And that I wonder if there's really a place for those dreams in the world. Like what happens if I access that and now I can't follow through on that? Or now my longing is at the surface and there's no way for that longing to be fulfilled. It is vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And yet, if we don't dare to dream, what is the world missing out on? Because our unique purpose is not being fulfilled. Jenni, thank you for this conversation. Tell people, and I'll put it in the show notes, where can people find you if they want to connect?
Yep, that's Sacred Commuters on Instagram and at JenniLaBrie.com. So pretty simple. And like I said, there's a bunch of freebies there. Feel free to check out that section and make your way through whatever might be of service. And of course, I'd love to connect with anybody that's listening. So by all means, reach out. I would love to connect with anybody that would like to talk more about it.
Awesome. Jenni, you are a true gift, and I'm so grateful for how you have defended dreams for me in my life as you wield words of hope in the world. Thanks for being here.
Gosh, I hope you'll have me back because this was a blast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Permission Slips podcast. I hope this conversation will give you permission to pay closer attention to the longings inside you as you explore the unique purpose you were made to fulfill in the world. Your life matters, and so do your dreams, more than you know.